What's up, guys? So I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Karma Cut, the creative director for Bellum, and we had some questions from our side, myself, as well as the Bellum community. So it's going to be a pretty in-depth video. A lot of solid questions, some more thorough, some more rapid fire, but I hope you enjoy it. Hey, if you do like tactical FPS games like this, make sure you check out the Discord below. We're going to be playing Bellum as soon as we are able to. So if you're into that stuff, consider joining. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Other than that, guys, let's hop into the video. Let's see. So the first thing, some of my colleagues made some videos and some posts about the additions, and I understand what they are. I didn't like how some of them worded it as, buying a game, because it's much more than that. Some of the things y'all are offering, and obviously how I see it is supporting a game, not just buying the game to be able to play it. So can you elaborate right now, kind of clear the air on what exactly the additions are meant to do as far as, funding your development process, and how do you feel now that it's all out there? How did it all turn out? Are you happy with the Founders Edition selling out, and, how is everything looking and on that end?
Sure. So this goes into like a lot of the strategy and unique positions that we have as a studio with our current setup with, me as a content creator, and just like looking at the options. So this is going to be a pretty in-depth answer as to like, as far as the strategy for the studio and why the things that we seem to do seem to be unorthodox. And in all fairness, red flags to the vast majority of people outside of the niche and people who are looking in. Like I totally get the criticism. I totally understand their viewpoints. It is, sad that it is a result of these people being taken advantage of and, essentially traumatized for years over, bad games coming out, charging a lot, or like certain game experiences charging a lot. And I think a lot of that stems from the whole idea that it all comes down to the trust that you have with the game studio. And so I think this project was a super clear example of like, if you trust the studio, then, the purchase makes, in a perfect world, right? If you trust all these game studios and you trust them to bring the product and you trust them to release what they say they'll release, and you don't think they'll like go down in controversy or implode miraculously, or continue to exploit players. Like, if that was the world we had, if that was the trust that the community had between the studio and the developers, then I think, just like in days past, because this isn't necessarily anything new that we're doing, the strategy would have been more widely accepted. But because of the current state that we're in and the storied past of tactical shooters, like we're in this position where every single game that comes out, people are extremely cautious and extremely wary and hesitant, and rightfully so. And so we understood that. We knew we'd probably get that hesitation going into it. So why did we do it like this? So if we look at the strategy behind the finances of things, right, and this is now something that I've had to open my eyes to just from the experience of owning a game studio and having to put the team together, having to figure out budgets, seeing how long our runway was, what is eating up the most finances and whatnot. And just knowing like the scope of our game and how I wanted to build a game, it really boiled down to a couple of things. The first is we wanted quality over quantity. That is like a key thing throughout a lot of the development. Is not only I mean that in the sense of like gameplay features and game design, but even in the community, right? So it is important to me, especially because you can see it happen a lot where quantity in the player base does not necessarily mean good things for these games, right? Anytime there's a massive influx of players to Hell Let Loose, to Squad, to Armor Forger, you can see it everywhere on Reddit and in YouTube comments, everywhere. Anytime there's a mass influx of players, it is generally speaking bad for these like quote unquote realistic style games. Flooding the player base with people that don't understand the core essence or the core pillars of what the original community wanted or what the original vision was ends up diluting that over time. So that was one of the factors, is we wanted to actually limit the scope of our reach. We wanted to grab the people who were, number one, okay with this being, another tactical shooter rolling out, okay with it being another platoon shooter rolling out, being okay with it being early access, right, and being okay with it being off-season. Like, it's a super, super, super targeted group of people. But I know that demographic is out there because I interact with them all the time. I'm one of those people, and I know that there's a group of individuals who understand what we're trying to do and understand that what we need to do has to be done very carefully and has to grow slowly with scale. If we go to Steam too early or we widen our net too far, you see this happen all the time. You've seen it happen in Tarkov. You've seen it happen in Hell Let Loose. You've seen this happen in Squad, where because you have such an influx of I'll use the term general players and not like tactical shooter fans or, realistic shooter fans, hardcore realistic shooter fans. When you see that flood of the general player base or the general population, you can see it actively as a detriment to the gameplay experience. So we wanted to be very specific in who we're selling to, and it was okay for us, right? Like it is okay for us if we don't go too wide too fast. Like that was almost a goal of ours, was to not oversell ourselves, was to not cast too wide of a net, seem too generally appealable, because we have a very specific vision in mind. Like the way I see the game being played, the way I see the game being built, it is pretty intense, right? We're not trying to retread the same path that a lot of these games take, which is like that middle ground between arcade and realism. And then it just naturally, over how the communities have been handled or the sales or how the game design happens, it just naturally continues to trend to like the arcadey side and, widen the net and population wise. The way we see ourselves growing our player base is very unique. And that is just having a core group of players, a super dedicated core base, because that to me is important, and retaining that as much as possible at scale is incredibly important. Having that group, training that group, having a new player pipeline in position, and also just because of the scale of the game, it is going to require years before I think the general player base is going to go like, oh, this is a cool, fun game that like not anyone, but like people who are remotely interested in it can hop in and go like, okay, this is a full experience, right? Like that's just the nature of these like highly realistic, authentic military games, is that there's so much depth, there's so many features that need to be done to a certain quality, that it just takes time before these games reach a state. And that is apparent in all the games out there right now. Like almost every tactical shooter that is widely popular right now has done the gamut, has done the gauntlet of that 10-year stretch of, when it first came out, it's rough. And we can get into the strategy or the thinking behind a lot of that. And a lot of that honestly comes down to finances, right? A lot of that comes into time and resources, and how these games get resources, and what that thinking does to the gameplay design over time, because those two are actually related. So one example I can use is, if you don't have your finances set up properly, or you've not made a monetization model that is friendly to long-term development, which is required for these kinds of games, the problem that you end up happening is that you have to figure out how you're going to continue funding that product. And generally in the past, we've seen things like where certain things that weren't in the original scope of the game are introduced. So whether that's microtransactions, you can kind of look at Tarkov Arena, you can kind of look at Squad saying they'll never have skins and then adding skins. You can look at people dumbing down their games to cast a wider net to get more players to make more money, right? So that whole thought process, that whole strategy and system, it actually affects the monetization system, actually affects long-term game design, because if you run out of money, you run out of money, and you have to figure out how you get that money. So for us, like going off Steam, that is one of the reasons is we can retain more with fewer people, and at scale that actually works better for us, because we're not 30% is a lot. It is a dramatic amount. So our thinking with the monetization model is long-term quality over quantity. And just by nature of how these games take a long time, as we continue building and adding features, the game, I personally believe, and I'm confident in, will appear to be more approachable, and will appear to be more widely accessible to the general player base as time goes on, but not out the gate. So we don't want to appeal out the gate to the general population, because it is not built at this stage for them. And that's a sad nature of things, of how the realistic game things work, right? You can even look at Arma and Bohemia Interactive, right? This studio has like 10, 20 years experience in the game development area. They still release Armor Forger in early access, right? So it's like these projects, like they just cost a lot of money. And now we have to ask ourselves, like, where do we get that money, right? So logically speaking, where do we get that money? Get that money from game sales. You can get it from publishers. You can get it from crowdfunding. You get it from Kickstarter, whatever the case may be, private investors and whatnot. And we looked at all of the options available to us. We're in a unique position because of my place in the genre, right? Like despite me not making a game, I have made multiple experiences. I've shown over the course of like essentially a decade that, this is my thing. I care about this thing. I can, make this thing happen in other places. So we're able to leverage that, and we're able to, luckily, right, this is something that is unique to this project, was find some people who are like-minded investors and get that money that way, because publishers are another thing, right? You could go the publisher route, but in my experience, that is also never worked out well in the niche. You can see like Hell Let Loose when they turned it over to Team 17, how that went. Ready or Not had to jump there, or jump ship on there, or I think their publisher jump shipped on them, or whatever the case was. New World Interactive with Insurgency Sandstorm, when they had that whole switch, that team got decimated. You can see publishers don't necessarily have the best interests at heart for the very specific hardcore group we're trying to cater to. Luckily, once again, going back, private investors and just leveraging my reputation was a position that we were very lucky to be in, and being able to gather funds that way. Or, Drewski and Wendigoon also hopping on, like they believed, and they only believed this project because, the past 10 years of my experience doing these things and knowing that I cared so much about it, and talking about it, they could tell that I had a plan for every step of the way.
Well, let me ask you
So
this.
that was another reason.
So like if you coming at it from, you as a creator standpoint, and all this, these, like you said, these experiences that you've made, it seems like you've thought a lot about that monetization model, about, making the game survive long term. How much do you lean, because I'm not really, I know y'all have a pretty significant dev team. How much do you lean on others' opinions and others' feedback? Like, or is it mainly just you kind of pushing this vision, or do you have people to kind of, challenge your views, challenge your opinions, or challenge your vision? Like how is that playing out, in the development of the game? How much do y'all communicate with each other on that?
For sure. In that regard, like I'm very lucky to have the trust of so many people. And this goes back to like kind of that pre-sale question, is like you can see that people trust, right? Like the fact that Founders sold out that fast was to me astonishing, but also just reinforced the idea that like people trust the vision. People like trust the experience that I have. But that's not to say that like I completely run the ship and no one has to say anywhere else in the dev team, and it's just like iron fisted and whatnot. We often have like plenty of open discussions on design or certain strategies. My business partner Barton, he actually does a lot of the number side. He's the CEO here, and so I trust him with a lot of financial and system side and number side of things. It's a lot of trust within the studio, but we still have like open discussions, debates about certain things. I'm listening everywhere, even in the Discord, even in the comments. Like I'm reading things, and sometimes these things give me ideas. Very open minded about the whole process, but I am lucky to have the trust of the team that they have an idea that I know what I'm doing.
Good deal. Moving on to like the Steam 1.0, you might have mentioned it in some other videos, and I apologize if I missed it. Well, I'm going on to Steam, like releasing on Steam. Is that going to be with 1.0, after 1.0, or before? Like, what y'all's plan on that?
So moving to Steam is not a concrete decision, right? That is something that is going to be it's an option, is what I'll say. It is always an option. There's always going to be the option for us to move to Steam. So there are multiple different worlds where this happens, right? In the worst case scenario, if like, gun to my head, we had to move to Steam, like, yeah, we'll move to Steam. We're not like extremely the way we've structured things right now. It's not like, oh, if we go to Steam, like we're in a horrible position. It's just that the longer we stay off Steam and the longer we are viable off Steam, like it is better for the studio, and in turn that is better for the player base, because it means we have more funds to create the features that you want and to continue development over a long period of time. I think the issue that most people have when they hear about like, oh, the studio, saving extra amount of money, is like there's so much distrust between the community and the developers and the studios that they don't necessarily even see the connection of like, oh, more money to the devs means it's good for me because the game gets better. Like that connection has been long lost at this point. People just don't have trust in development teams, and for good reason. And we understand that, but like, I don't think that distrust was enough of a reason for us to attempt to use this strategy to make sure we have the best chance bringing the game to fruition. I think if we can demonstrate, because we're going in this with good intentions, right? We're going in this to make the game for the people, and like we understand people might look at it differently, but from our perspective, we're using the strategy despite the criticism that is best suited to the long-term longevity of the studio. And going to Steam is always a back pocket option. There's no concrete plans to go to Steam, but gun to my head, if we had to, we will. It's not going to like destroy anything. We just have to pivot, as indie studios are always comfortable pivoting. Every day there's something that needs to change, something that needs to happen in the plan to improve our odds. But right now we're pretty confident that, once again, going back to not being on Steam, one of the advantages that we have is the content creator network that we own, right? Or the the experience that we have working with the Steam infrastructure side of things or the marketing side of things. Marketing, we feel like we can completely handle just via content creator side pushes. And that's just because, once again, Steam, when it comes to discoverability and marketability, it is marketing to like a general player base, right? The people that we're trying to market to are people who are fans of the genre, are aware of genre news, are, you know, hooked in and ready to play, right? Kind of people, not necessarily people who are, you know, browsing the Steam store. Oh, this looks interesting and plugging in and playing. That's not who we're aiming for right now. Once again, that's later down the road. So the discoverability, we feel like we can fill that gap with the content creator reach. And I think the fact that we were able to market the tiers, the pre-order tiers, the fact that that is so widespread and everyone's talking about it is kind of proof that, you know, we can put ourselves on the map. We don't need Steam to do that. And you can almost point to the fact that the Founders sold out in 2 days is even more so proof that we are able to market the game without Steam. And then in addition to that, the infrastructure side of things, the server side of things, the game distribution side of things, which is another thing that generally studios lean on Steam to help them with. We have a lot of experience with from the AWN.GG side of things over there in that company. We have a lot of experience working with other game studios and distributing their games that are not on Steam. So we've seen how that works. We have the infrastructure, we have the hardware, we've worked through a lot of that already. So that's what makes this project incredibly unique. Is just there's certain things that put us in a unique position to be in this spot. And like worst case scenario, right? The Steam option is always there. It is always easier to go onto Steam than to be on Steam and move yourself off of it. So that's like the whole encompassing idea behind why we're not on Steam. There's like a whole bunch of other small, tinier reasons as to why not. But yeah, like I hope that kind of opens people's eyes as to the decision. It's not just like, oh, 30%, that's it. It's like, there's a lot of reasons behind, you know, longevity, the targeted player base, the experience we have with infrastructure and marketing. And that, once again, infrastructure and marketing, that saves costs for us. Saving costs for us is good because it, once again, means we can put more money into the game and continue development for longer, which is better for these studios. Because you see a lot of these studios just peter out or they stay in early access forever, and now they have to figure out ways to get money. And that's where a lot of these tactical shooters end up having problems. Is, okay, we're 5 years into development. We need more money. What do we do? Do we introduce skins at this point after the player base is so used to not having skins? Do we open up a whole new game mode and try to like monetize there? Do we try to open it up and make it more casual so more casual players get in and you're going the quantity route? That's I think where a lot of these games have had a turning point. And so we're trying to avoid that turning point as much as possible and stay as consistent as long as possible down the road.
Makes me pretty excited. I know quite a few founders, and that was one of the main reasons they decided to go the founder route, was because it was off Steam, it was isolated, it was targeted towards them. They could help, support, do all that stuff. And I think, like you said, it's extremely unique. It's something that you don't really see every day. I've seen it a lot from, you know, like Chinese developers and things like that. But here, man, it's kind of rare. I know everybody goes for that Steam launch, and like you said, everybody's in early access forever, it seems like, and you never get a real polished product until well after the review bombs, you know, update after update and all that stuff. So my next question is more about the game. I wanted to really get a answer on this, you know, kind of straight to it. The comparisons with Arma Squad, they're already pretty apparent. That's the, you know, same kind of players you're going to be having, ready or not, all that stuff. So I think I know myself just from seeing it, having not played it. I kind of know how it differs, but I want to know in your own words exactly, what do you have to achieve? What do you want to achieve with Bellum that's going to set you apart from people, or from like those titles that people are already playing?
Sure. So the main thing I think that will set our product apart from like other games out there is like the actual emphasis on teamwork. It's not just like thrown out there like, yeah, teamwork kind of matters and you got to communicate and whatnot. But teamwork is effective and it actually functions the way it is intended to function, mirroring real world tactics in our specific game. Because that's something that I think a lot of people who play these games that get super frustrated with is you go into these experiences expecting like a certain level of competency or certain level of teamwork, right? And then you get into matches and no one's talking. People are just running everywhere. It's like an individualized thing, and it's just completely chaotic. The one experiences that, or some experiences that can get close to this, right, are like modded experiences, whether it be in Arma 3 or or anywhere else, or specific events, wine life events, or events that people run on. Um, but those are not very accessible to the general player base, right? There's not really an easy way for us to jump in and have those experiences. So that's kind of where we see ourselves specifically targeted. Is we want the quality, or we want to take these kind of really high quality events and high quality experiences and make them accessible, without the use of mods. So like that ties into a big reason of like why we aren't going the modding route. Just because me personally, as a gamer and like community leader within this space, like personally, I'm tired of mods. I'm tired of having to deal with jank on jank on jank on jank, and then having to administrate the server, and having to deal with all these tools, and then you have to go through this black hole of ARMA configuration to make sure everything works, and then you have to get the community together. You have to get there's so much work that goes into creating that high quality experience that we just kind of want to cut straight to it and make it as accessible as games like Squad or Hell Let Loose, where we can load up and play, but have that depth and all those features, and have that teamwork enforced by game design that a lot of the events or specific things I've tried and created in the past have. So that's where we sit. I can try to get a little bit more specific, but I would say it's mainly just one of the goals is that's unique in our game that is different from a lot of others is we want real world tactics to work in our game. So a lot of the game design is based around making those authentic experiences possible, rather than having gamified game modes or yeah, there's a lot of things that in the games that we see out there today, right now, that just they don't allow for the authentic military, fantasies. I talk about that a lot with Dance's interviews. Like, there's certain fantasies that people have that they want to do in these specific games, and it is not necessarily attainable. Um, and you can get them in Arma 3, but Arma 3 requires so much groundwork and so many hoops to jump through that I think it was really prohibitive to a large amount of people. And ours, we want to also just get that in the PvP sense. And we think it's possible. It's definitely something that's new and something that hasn't been tried before. And like, that's kind of the point, right? We all want something new. We all want something that hasn't really been tried before. It's going to be difficult for sure. But I think, we've got a solid plan. We have ideas that are tested. And I think we can really bring a unique experience that leverages the teamwork and the cohesion that maybe is lacking elsewhere.
Well, I'll tell you this, for me, because I'm not full milsim. I kind of like the chill sim stuff. I do like the tactics and things like that, and I know a little bit, right? But for me personally, when I first saw it, I saw that the scale was a little bit different, and for me, I can hop into Arma, hop into Squad, try to learn all the terminologies and different things for squad leading or aircraft, different types of vehicles, all that stuff. It's over my head. I don't really know it, but I still like a thorough tactical game. I still love it. I try to learn as much as I can, but your game so far, on the scale that it is, it seems so accessible to people like me, that are kind of in that middle chill sim type of playing. And that's for me, if I was to answer the question myself, it seems going through those communications, working as a team on a smaller scale instead of a big wide open map where you're trying to meet up with somebody. It takes you an hour to get to them. You got the radios going off. It's pretty confusing. So for me, yeah, that's, if you want to touch on that, is there your scale,
Yeah.
keeping it, are you going to keep it, or do you want to get it to as big as something like Armor, or are you going to keep it more like that?
No, so just like this is a general theme with a lot of design and strategy at the studio itself, is we want to go in very surgically, right? Like, everything we do is specifically targeted. There's a specific reason behind everything that we do, and that includes the scale of things, right? And there's a reason for that, and we talk about it in Dance's interviews. Like, depth brings width. As funny enough as that sounds, right? If we can make a really well-tuned infantry experience that isn't overcomplicated with all these different vehicles and all these different things going on, like it is just you and your guys, and you're working with the tools that you have. It is much more of an accessible space to jump into, rather than, okay, we've got tanks, we've got helicopters, we've got jets, we've got all this stuff going on. I have to figure out how to get over here, and like 1,000 people are doing 1,000 different things. That's part of almost the reason why teamwork breaks down and cohesion breaks down in these experiences, is because there's simply just too much to do. There's too much to do and too much freedom to do certain things. And so like, people just go off and they do whatever. And as a result of that, it just turns into a massive headache. Or there's just so many things to learn and it gets overwhelming. what we really believe in at Bellum is making sure that the thought process behind the player is as intuitive as humanly possible. Because if you make things intuitive, you can go into extreme depth because things just make sense. So, like for example, like one of the goals that I have to myself that I don't really share with the team or anyone is like I know I'm kind of doing things right if I can take an infantry dude or if I can take someone that kind of knows basic tactics and he can play the game and what he does makes sense, works, and is effective. That's kind of how a lot of the design is centered around as well, because we want that human instinct. The problem in a lot of these games, in my opinion, sometimes what happens is you end up adding a whole gamified element of like, okay, now there's tickets, now there's caps. Okay, what happens when you have four people on the cap versus the, and then all this other wacky stuff like okay this vehicle costs 5 tickets and that and then you have all these game mechanics and gameisms that require so much knowledge in order to min max that you end up losing the essence of let me just sit in this experience and make the real world decisions I would make and be effective, and that has been turned into this monster of like, and this was like something that's super apparent in squad when you played at high levels or on like super competitive servers is like, okay, 3 people, you're going to sit in this back cap here. We're going to take this vehicle. We're going to fly it over here. We're going to drop the fob. You're only going to bring exactly 700 build points. It's like you start losing yourself in that stuff because you're playing the rules and not necessarily the experience through your character. And that is an important part of the experience we're trying to bring is making sure that you stay grounded in what your character sees and you're making decisions on the task at hand and the situation at hand, because I think that is also where you get the most amount of immersion. That kind of ties into our goals for immersion is making sure that you're not really too worried about this macro objective that is overriding your will to do certain things. You are very much doing what your body and mind would want to do in that situation, which is stay alive and kill the enemy, right? Like killing the enemy is a priority objective. It is not superseded in many cases like in other games over like getting on the cap or defending a certain random point or dog piling in to make sure the number goes up or whatever. It is very much like making sure you're in the spot and you are thinking how you would think, and that is I think that's a unique thing in our game that we've kind of taken a step back or because I talk about the stance is like PTFO I think is detrimental to the experience. It rips you out of that mindset of like what you should be doing as an individual right there, right then in that moment. And you're now opening up your map, you're looking at the things, you're counting the people, you're like doing all this stuff, and that sucks you out of the immersion. And that's an example I can point to there is Tarkov, right? In Tarkov, like the drivers behind the experience and the game design behind that experience mirror those of what your brain would typically in most cases there are some tasks that require some wacky things to be done, and you gotta like, okay, I gotta sprint over here and do all this crazy stuff because that's what the task is making me do.
Yep.
But that's also a great example of like how that design does that versus like design where it's like, okay, do this task and stay alive. Okay, you're locked in, you're doing a thing, you're staying alive, and it feels right because that it feels natural, it feels intuitive, you're locked in, and you're not. That's where it gets the max amount of immersion, of course tied with other things like punishing death and other mechanics, but it is one of the reasons why that game works the way it does.
Absolutely. Okay, so these next ones, rapid fire. They're going to be from my homies first. We got a few questions here, and then we're going to do some from the Bellum Discord. So the first one, he asked, was one of our VIPs. Can you ask if the Rangers are going to have any of the new MCX spears as an option, whether it be at release or earlier?
Sure. So really quick on that one, I don't really think the Rangers are using the 6.8 spears. I think they're doing them in testing, but they just recently got the Block 3 Irgis, and I don't think they're planning on moving off that anytime soon. Of course, that could always change, but the majority of them have swapped out the Block 2s for the Block 3s. So we don't really see spears entering this particular unit's armory until we see that happen widespread IRL, I think.
Cool. What objects, if any, because I don't know if I saw this in any of the devlogs or anything, but mounting, can we mount? Would that be in soon? And proning, will that increase accuracy or decrease any stamina issues or anything like that?
Yeah, so stances will have an effect on how you aim and the stability of how you aim. Bipods are already functional to a degree. We do plan on having mounting as a result, just because that is roughly the same system. So yeah.
Cool. So uniforms, we're taking it back to that accessible to other people, that aren't really crazy hardcore milsim that might be trying your game. uniforms, will they be different enough to identify? Do y'all find that now? Will they be different enough to identify friendlies, or do you see a lot of friendly fire? Is that even in your game happening with newcomers?
That is a super interesting question. This is not going to be a short answer.
All
Just
right.
heads up. So, all right. So this kind of cycles back to um, oh, this is a super complicated, intertangled space of design. So, PID, we'll start with PID. PID is an essential task of an infantryman. It is one of the things IRL that make shooting people difficult. So, you can see a lot of games, they attempt to make shooting difficult by, making the recoil crazy, by blurring your screen, by making the sway insane. There's a lot of way by making the recoil random. There's a lot of ways to make shooting itself difficult. But one of the reasons why shooting is difficult in real life, and this just comes from talking to, real world infantrymen or people with combat experience, and like anecdotally my nerdy airsoft experience, playing in some of these milsim events. One of the reasons why shooting people is difficult is because you have to PID, and PID makes it so that you can. People always talk about wanting to extend TTK because TTK is a factor of like how arcade or how hardcore something is versus bullet sponges like Halo. But you can extend the TTK in other ways other than just gunplay and damage, right? You can make it hard to identify certain people. You can make it so that wind affects the trajectory of your rounds. You could make it so there's body armor so that certain parts of the body you have to be very careful about where you're placing your shots. There's like a whole bunch of ways, and this goes into like how we handle a lot of the problems. Is you're going to have to look further back at how we analyze and fix certain issues because generally the answer is going to be there. I'm not a big fan of just like, oh, shooting's too easy, let's just make shooting harder, or XYZ is this is the I'd rather go all the way back to the source of the issue of what we're looking at and fixing it there. So in terms of uniforms are going to be, there's two things we take a look at when it comes to uniforms. The first is making sure that to some degree, whether it's the uniform or the player silhouette or the equipment on them, that is somewhat distinguishable enough and different enough from other factions that it is somewhat easy to identify that a player is part of another faction. The second thing is that we want these factions to be using the authentic clothing and materials that they would be using. So it's a tricky problem to solve on the art side. We just have to be super careful about how we're designing the characters. Some of the characters, even the Russians, you notice we have like the red armbands on as well, even though they're wearing multicam. So there will be certain things that distinguish factions from each other. No two factions will look exactly the same. They might look similar, and that is a byproduct of the design and the adherence to authenticity. But it is also just going to be reinforced. Once again, looking back, this isn't an isolation thing. We understand the issues apparent with two factions with similar uniforms. This is also going to bleed into, and this is how everything's interconnected. This bleeds into how we're handling team kills. This bleeds into how the life system works. This bleeds into how the information on the map works. It's all stuff that's connected, but you can be sure that some of our goals are: number one, we're going to be authentic. Number two, you are going to be able to tell the difference between two factions. And that kind of ties into like a skill thing. And people love having, skill ceilings and skills floors, right? An experienced player is going to be better than a newer player. And that's by design. We want you to be able to improve at this game because I think that's important. And that just people love learning and being challenged. And then so you can identify different, they are going to be authentic, and they are going to be reinforced. Don't worry, there's supporting systems to avoid people pretending to be opposite factions running into your squad, or any of the gaminess that you see in games like Arma, where you can put on other people's uniforms and do absolutely wacky gamey stuff. Like, don't worry, we have those things. I've experienced those things. I know those things are problems. We're developing with those problems in mind.
Cool. So weapon customization. I don't know if you're familiar with Ground Branch. Being able to position flashlights, lasers, grips on different parts of the rails. Like, how much customization will you have with the weapons, or will it be just kind of fixed classes?
So we are definitely going to have a form of customization, just as a result of, you've already seen the skins, so you're already going to have some control over how your weapon looks. We are also going to have planned, right? We still have to do a decent bit of development, balance, and tweaking on this system. But at some point in time, we will also have the ability for you to tweak certain things about your kit. It's not going to be as in depth as Arma or Ground Branch, where you're freaking moving things like 2 slots down the rail, or like Tarkov, where you're adding a whole bunch of things to different rails. Even it's going to be pretty cookie cutter customization. I could say you could probably look at games like Ready or Not, and it'd be roughly similar to that, where you have like key points of the weapon that you're changing. Certain things you won't be able to change because it's like we want this to be authentic. So obviously, like so suppressors is one, right? So for example, the Rangers, all the riflemen, they will have suppressors. I don't think you will be able to take those off just because that is how that faction runs. That is how that faction is meant to operate. And having a whole bunch of people with suppressors on, with suppressors off, would just be a really weird experience, I think,
Hmm.
in terms of immersion and cohesion of the environment. But yeah, weapon customization to some degree, like Tarkov, being able to change out the scope, being able to maybe change out the ammo, maybe. But we don't want it to be like Tarkov or Call of Duty, where changing around these things gives you stat differences to the gun.
Sure.
It is primarily going to be cosmetic changes to the weapon. A couple key things will change how the weapon operates, but it is not going to be like +5 accuracy, +5 weapon spread. It's not going to be like that. It's primarily functional pieces of kit that actually do something different. And this also expands itself to the characters itself. Because again, we have to go through and we have to balance, tweak, and develop some of this stuff. But it's going to be similar to like every kit will have one slot. We're hoping to have one slot where they can tweak that slot to the task at hand or to that player's liking. So one piece of special equipment, and that's just because we think that being able to give your character even the tiniest bit of different capabilities is unique. It's important. It also, once again, adds in a skill gap, and we want to put that wherever we can because players love learning. They love being able to flex their skills and experience, and knowing what tool to take at what time is an important task. There's also going to be, to some degree, other customization as well as cosmetics. That is going to be extremely limited. It is always going to be grounded, and once again, that just ties into our longer term um, strategy on just how long this game will take to develop and being able to support ourselves without having to dip into really wacky situations or publishers or anything like that. But they will be they'll be very controlled, they'll be very grounded, and there's not going to be that many of them. This is what I can say. We don't plan on like flooding the game with cosmetics. That's not a goal. The goal of cosmetics is strictly just to support long term development.
Cool. Okay, so I know you just talked about depth and width, with the game. So this guy asked, are they going to be open to larger scale engagements in the future? If not, like I guess scaling your game to be, kind of the same size as some of these others. If not, or I guess if so, what is your ideal player limit going to be per server?
Sure. So player limits are just very very interesting at this point in time in development, just because there's so much we have to develop, and we have not, had the mass to stress test things to the max. Like I don't at this point, I don't know what the max number of players is, just because we haven't had we haven't had the player base to test that yet. As far as like what is tolerable for performance, and we also haven't done any, major optimization sweeps. So there's going to be a decent amount of time before we can give you a really solid answer on player counts. Unfortunately, what we can say is that it is planned for platoon versus platoon. So that's the original scope of the game, and that is also just because that is how the game mode what has been designed for.
Mhm.
Is that scope in mind? We don't want to get too crazy, right? Because we haven't necessarily designed for anything too crazy as far as like having massive battles and this unlimited scope that some games have, and being able to pack like 250 players into a server or whatever. That is not necessarily anything that we've designed around or for. But yeah, player count is just going to be dynamic. If people remember Squad was like slowly raising their player counts as well, because the same thing. It's just a factor of early access development. Is you have features that are going to work for certain numbers. You have certain optimizations that make certain things possible. Um, and just performance is always a thing that is constantly changing. People get new hardware, uh, new server, new server things come out. That was another thing too. Just I remember off the top of my head is there were some moments in time where Squad literally did no real changes to their product, but better server hardware came out, which enabled higher player count numbers to be attainable. So yeah, it's just going to be a dynamic number. The only thing we can say right now is that we're planning for Platoon versus Platoon. If it goes higher, who knows? It'd be nice for sure, but I can't really give a solid answer on that.
Cool. So in the TikTok world that we live today, you know, short retention, and I know like a lot of these guys that are, you know, supporting already probably don't have that as much as people, but you know, the short retention span of today's generation, how do you plan to grab long-term player retention? I know you already mentioned, you know, you want a premium game, you're not really into the, you know, microtransactions, all that stuff, but will there be any sort of DLCs or seasonal content that you're going to put in the game?
At this point in time, we have no plans to do any kind of like DLC content, like in the terms of like I'm thinking old school DLC where like a faction comes out and you have to pay and buy it. All factions, all maps at this point in time in our strategy will be always completely free to the player base. Mainly because that stuff splinters player bases very easily, and we don't want that to happen.
Yep.
So, the one of the strategies we're probably gonna have is I don't really want to talk about that yet. So
Yeah,
I'll
that's
keep
fine,
that
man.
one as a surprise.
That's fine.
But as far as season passes, we have not done any hard plans on season passes or like battle passes or anything like that. There's no plans for that at this point in time. Like right now, like a lot of our focus is just getting to the first stage, right? Getting to the first stage, and we have some plans for long-term longevity. And then as far as it comes to the question being like, what do we do with short attention span people? To a certain degree, they're just going to get filtered out.
Yeah,
To a
I
certain degree,
imagine.
like they just do not belong in the game. This is not the game for them.
Mhm.
It's totally fine. You know, there's plenty of games that are built for different people, and this one's just built for the crowd that is looking for the more deliberate, more intimate uh, infantry fighting experience. We're going to do our best to keep players engaged throughout the entirety of their play session, right? And that is tied into a couple of game design aspects. One being like the amount of information on the map, right? Tarkov does this very well because when you're on the map, you're kind of locked in because you have no idea what could happen, where people are, and so you're always careful, always aware. Of course, that ties into progression because you die and you lose stuff. That's also going to be you'll have flavors of that in our game as well, where dying is bad for other reasons than you're dead, which will make you not want to die, which in turn makes you more aware and awake. Hopefully, we're hoping to have exciting maps and exciting environments over time, so that you guys can, as you're walking, you're visually engaged as well. But I think a lot of keeping people engaged, especially in these games, comes from the essence of that fog of war, that unknowing, and that value of your life that you do not want to lose it, so you're paying attention. That's where we handle a lot of the attention issues. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. So let's look at something a little bit more shallow then. Is there any plans for like actual in-game events or like weather conditions changing? You might probably going to be adding nighttime, I'm sure, but like, is there going to be, instead of playing the same map, same style over and over, what type of depth will you add, or that you'll add, if you can say, to the game?
Sure. So weather is definitely one, just because we're a big fan of dynamic and random kind of gameplay states because it dramatically increases replayability. So you're definitely going to see to some degree weather over time in development, maybe sooner than later. We're definitely just going to have some kind of weather, and even passage of time is important to us as well.
Mhm.
So you'll definitely see a degree of that. Of course, our sessions are not, it's not an open world 24/7 server, right? So you're not going to have like a whole day night cycle. But just like every match, you might have it go from day to night or night to day. You might have it start raining, stop raining, just to mix things up. And as a factor of that, you'll make different decisions in the field. And then you add that with the randomization of the game mode and the player starts and the factions and all this stuff, and it should hopefully be an incredibly dynamic experience. Of course, a lot of these features will come with time. We've already messed around and tooled around with the weather system right now, but we're still focused once again on priority features before we flesh out weather and time fully.
Gotcha. Like that. So last few here, man. I appreciate your time. This is actually a really big one, and I really like it here because it focuses. I mean, we have our five senses, right? And audio in these games. After playing, I don't know if you played Arc Raiders. Their audio and some of these other games coming out, they're really trying to nail down audio. The audio in that game belongs in a milsim. I'm just gonna like be straight. I have not heard of something that's so crisp based on where you're at on the map, if you're indoors, outdoors, just everything is just like so pristine. How serious are you guys taking audio? Are you happy with your audio right now? Or do you plan on making it a big part of your game, or do you just kind of, I'm not saying obviously you're not going to say, hey, we're just winging it, but how important or how much focus are you putting on that when it comes to these games, as far as like suppression, grenades, all that type of stuff, indoor, outdoor, all that stuff?
Audio is super important to us. We're just limited by resources and time currently, but we pay a decent amount of attention to audio. I mean, but this goes for like all features and everything in the game right now. Like we are still pre-alpha. A lot of stuff is subject to change. A lot of stuff just needs to be worked on, right? So I'd say it'd be a better question to ask closer to when we're like at 1.0, because that would be a better representation of like what we are happy with and what we're satisfied on keeping, for the long term. But we do pay a lot of attention to the audio. We do pay a lot of attention to how things look. Certain things right now are definitely placeholder. But like to give you an example of how much we care about audio, like in my opinion, suppression snaps are some of the most important things when it
Mhm.
comes to getting shot at. Like that's a very unique experience. It should be scary. It should be loud, right? Like it should like audio is a huge factor in these games. Being able to tell, especially with our ballistic system, how far away someone's shooting, what caliber that was, did it ricochet off of something? Like sound plays into those systems as well. Even so much as like we've had playtesters who are very avid shooters bring up things related to like the Doppler effect and how bullets sound when they pat. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of attention to detail to that stuff. What I can say is it is definitely a priority. It is very early for the project though, and we have not like reached the stages of 1.0. So closer to 1.0, I think everyone will have a better idea of like, okay, this is getting locked in, right? But I would just let everyone know that all the way up to 1.0, what we determine our 1.0 release, which is, still a year plus down the line, um, everything is subject to change. Things are being developed all the time. Things are being improved all the time. Yeah, it's just once again like the depth that realistic shooters have to go to develop these things is just a factor of time and money. It's why these games take so long. Arcade shooters can get away with certain things because it's like, yeah, sure, it's like no one really cares. It doesn't really do too much. But yeah, for we have to get things realistic, and that requires a lot of math. It requires a lot of time. We can't just make things up because we are restricted by these bounds that people are aware of already, right? It's not like a sci-fi game where we can just like, yeah, just make a TIE
Yeah.
fighter sound,
Make
and
it
like no
up.
one knows what a TIE fighter sounds like. So sure, that sounds great. But like for our game, it's like we have to adhere to a very strict level of near simulation in order to appease the crowd that enjoys that attention to detail.
Good. Good. I like that. I think you touched on this some already, but malfunction, jamming, overheating. Are all three of those going to be in, or just some of them?
All three will be in to a degree, 100%. Because the barrel swapping for the 240 doesn't have any function unless there's barrel overheating mechanics. Um, the idea the idea in weapon malfunctions, the philosophy we have behind that is to reinforce the idea that you want to go in with a team, right? Because going into a room alone and having your gun jam absolutely sucks. Going into a room with a team and having your gun jam is not as bad. So there's like reasons, and this goes back to like the amount of research and just detail we have in regards to what actually makes team tactics IRL work and why certain people do certain things. There's like all these different reasons of like these small little fringe cases or contingencies that happen that you have to account for, which reinforce teamwork at that level. And so we have to go through, and like it's just going to take time and create all these tiny factors that kind of mimic the real world thought process of why you would do something. Why would I barrel change? Well, because if I don't barrel change, barrel warps, gun goes down. Well, that kind of fucking sucks. Or I go into a room alone. I don't have backup. I weapon jam. I'm dead now. I don't have another gun in the room. This is expanded to the medical system, to the suppression system, to the respawn system. They're at every level of every point of design. There's thinking behind it that is like, why do people in the real world act like this? Why is this important in the real world? And how does this affect the teamwork dynamic and the goals that we have set out for in Bellum? And so that expands itself to a lot more than just. I know the question was just, will
Yeah.
there be jamming? Yeah, there will be
No, I
these
see what you're
mechanics to an
saying.
extent, but going
Cool.
into the philosophy behind it, I think is important because
Right.
you might glean why we might do other systems as well, because you can kind of take this mentality and apply it to any question you might have, and if the question aligns with like our philosophy, then more than likely we will have it. So that's kind of why I answer the question that way. So I know it's kind of
No,
confusing,
I get
but
what you're saying. Uh, two more here. We had a guy from Bellum ask about. I guess I missed this. Maybe I didn't, or I can't remember. But the clan system, is that a thing?
So it was just I talked about it with Dance on his podcast, and it was just kind of a meme. So like clan systems are a meme in these tactical shooters
Yeah,
because
like
every game says that they have them. Every game says they'll work on them. Everyone says that they'll have clan patches. We're gonna try to actually make it happen, and happen in a timely manner because it is important that communities are able to group up, be recognized, work together,
yeah.
because they are such a pillar of the game itself and a core part of the experience.
So you're saying we're gonna be able, if we have enough people, we can get us a patch for the like for the actual gear of the factions potentially.
The details of that, of how of how how extreme we get or how many features we have there are yet to be discussed and fleshed out. But what I will say is like it is important to us that clans have some functionality
Yeah,
and some support in the game itself.
cool. Last question here from another one of your founders. Eventually, potentially, Blackhawks, Chinooks, larger aircraft like
Yeah,
that.
rotary
Okay.
aircraft is definitely planned. It is a ways out because we have to do ground vehicles first. And once again, we want things to be as authentic as possible. So that means making sure the flight model's right,
Yeah.
that's making sure the interior's right, that's making sure you can do a lot of cool things with the airframe that are not present in other games because we're going that step deeper.
Okay.
So I'm very excited for when we get rotary in because there's a lot of cool things with these vehicles that you can do that a lot of games just don't. Dude, so similar to how medium machine guns, there's a lot of cool depth you can get into with medium machine guns that most games never touch. There's no belt linking, there's no tripod placement,
Right.
there's no barrel changing in any of the modern shooters without like mods currently. There's just a lot of cool things that you can do with depth, and having depth with the airframes is definitely a priority when we get to them.
Sweet. Well, man, I know that was quite a few, but I really appreciate it. That's all I have. I know you're busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And yeah, unless you got anything else to say, I'll end it right here on the recording.
No, I appreciate you asking the questions. Hopefully, was able to give people a little bit more insight into the thought process here, and appreciate everyone that's paying attention to the project, even just supporting it, writing things, nice supportive things. Outside of financial support, that really does mean a lot. And yeah, we look forward to going down this journey. It's gonna be a journey. It's gonna take time. Is what I have to say. Like I know everything I'm saying sounds great, but it will take time. That's just a natural side of indie studio development. Everyone's just got to be patient, but I hope that people with armed with this information can understand the path that we're going to and the path that we're going to try to stick to for as long as possible.